In this video, we will talk about enhanced ERD, and we will focus on this video on the subtype and supertype notations. So first of all, what is an enhanced ERD, or what we call EER or EERD? So the enhanced ERD is used to identify the model that has resulted from extending the original ER diagram with some of new modeling constructs. First of them being subtype and supertype. We also have some constraints on subtype and supertype relationships. And we have what we call entity clustering, which is having a virtual entity that will have multiple entities on them. Now, we will not talk about this last part, which is entity clustering, as this is outside of the scope of this course, but we will be focusing on subtypes and supertypes, and we will also focus on the constraints on the subtype or supertypes. Now let's talk about subtypes and supertypes. What is a subtype? What is a supertype? So a supertype is going to be a generic entity type that has a relationship with one or more subtypes. And a subtype is a subgroup of the entities in the entity type. So it is going to be specialized entities having distinct attributes from those in other subgroups. We will see some more examples to make this more clear, but a simple example would be if I have a person and then I have, let's say, a teacher and then a student. So the supertype is a person because a teacher is a person and a student is a person. But then the subtypes will be teacher and student because a teacher will have more different attributes than a student, and a student will have some different attributes than the teacher. And we'll see how we can model those in the ERD. Now we have some attribute inheritance that's going to be happening here because subtype entities will inherit the values of all attributes and instances of all relationships of the supertype. So whatever is happening at the supertype level is going to also happen at the subtype level. But whatever is happening at the subtype level is not necessarily happening at the supertype level. So how is the notation first? How can we draw this in our ERD? So we'll have a line with a circle connecting the supertype to the subtypes, and there is an optional U shape that emphasizes the direction of the relationship. So you don't have to have that U shape. It's an optional, but sometimes it's good to use it in case you have your subtypes listed above your supertype. Now, as we can see from this diagram, we have the subtype there, and then we have our line with the circle, and then we'll have our subtype. So from the supertype right here on the top, we have attributes that are going to be shared by every one of those subtypes. So any attributes in here will be shared by this and shared by this. Now this means if I have an attribute right here, let's say ID, in the case of person, let's say social security number, then I will not list it in here because it's going to be inherited in those. Now if I talk about this, when I say student type, for example, graduate or undergraduate, I will have to list it here, but I will not list it here because the person is not necessarily a student. Same thing for the other entity, for example, teacher. So is the teacher full-time or part-time? Let's have an attribute that says type. Again, it's going to be listed here, but not listed here. Okay, and again, any relationship that's happening here is going to happen right here. So if I have a relationship at person level, so for example, a person lives in, let's say, some apartment. So each person is going maybe living in an apartment or something, and then this applies to both teachers and students. But then if I say registers for courses, then student will register for courses, but a teacher is not going to register for courses. A teacher is going to teach courses. So these are going to be specialized relationships. So when I have a relationship at the subtype level, it's going to be specific to that subtype. And if I have a relationship that's at the supertype level, it is going to be shared among all of those subtypes. Now let's look at an example and see how we can model this. And this is going to also give us more idea on where to include all attributes. So suppose that we have an organization with three types of employees. We have hourly employees, we have salaried employees, and we have contract consultants. So let's look what we have here in terms of attributes. So I have employee number here, employee name, address, date hired, and hourly rate. And then for the salaried employee, I have employee number, employee name, address, date hired, annual salary, and stock option. And for contract consultants, I have employee number, employee name, address, date hired, contract number, and billing rate. Now, if I look closely at this, I have some common attributes. So employee number is shared among all three. Employee name is shared among all three. Address, same thing. Date hired, exact same thing. It's also shared among those three. Now, what I have in terms of unique attributes are a little bit different. So if I'm looking for unique attributes right here, I have hourly rate that is unique to hourly employees. I have annual salary and stock option that are unique to salaried employee. I have contract number and billing rate that are unique to the contract consultants. So as we said, these are all shared among those types or those three types of employees, and we have some more attributes that are distinct based on the subtype of employee. Now, can we say that there is a general type for this? The answer is yes, all of them are employees. So we will define a single entity that's called employee, and we will define a separate entity type for each of those three entities. And then we will define employee as the supertype because all of those three entities can fall under employee. And then we will have the three subtypes as hourly employee, salaried employee, and consultant, or you can call it contract consultant. And again, we will follow the notation, which is the line and the circle. So this is going to denote our subtype supertype relationship. So this is our line, this is our circle, and then we have 1, 2, 3 subtypes. And notice this, all of the attributes that are shared, so these are shared attributes, will go on this supertype level. You do not include any of the shared attribute in the subtype level. Now if you look at the subtype level, all of these are specific to those subtypes. So only hourly employees have this, only salaried employees have those two attributes, only consultant have those two attributes. Because again, whatever is on the supertype level is shared among all of the subtypes, but whatever is on the subtype level is specific to that subtype and is not shared among the other employees. This applies to attributes and applies to relationships as well. So let's talk about the relationships, and since we just mentioned them. So again, the relationships that are at the supertype level will apply to all the subtypes, and relationships at the subtype level will only apply to those subtypes. So all patient instances, for example, will have relationship with medical record instances. And then if we look at resident patients, only those will have a bed. Outpatients will not have any beds. So how can we draw this is using this example. So this is one example that shows us the relationship. And I'll say, okay, I have the patient entity type, and I say, okay, each patient is cared for by a responsible physician. And then I can have some kind of medical record right here, and then I will have some kind of cardinality, something like this. And I will say, okay, I have another relationship which is assigned a bed. Now, if I place it like this with the resident patient, that means only resident patients will participate in this relationship. If I place it on top, that means all patients will participate in this relationship. Now what I want is I want only resident patients to have beds, and that's why I need to place it in here. Now this means all patients will have responsible physician, regardless of being resident or outpatient. All patients are going to have medical records regarding of those patients being outpatients or resident patients, but only resident patients can participate in this relationship, which is being assigned a bed. Now, when do we use supertype and subtype? When we have attributes that apply to some entity instances but not apply to others, and then we have some common attributes as well for those entity types, or when we have instances of a subtype that has a relationship that is unique to that subtype. For example, patient, as we see in outpatient and resident patient, where only resident patient is assigned a bed. So even if we have the same attributes but we have a different relationship, we can model this as subtype and supertype. Now, a question that may come in, can a subtype be a supertype as well? So can I have an entity that is a subtype and then the same entity is also a supertype for some entities? The answer is yes. Let's look at this. So if I have a vehicle, each vehicle is going to have a VIN number and an engine displacement. Then I have a car, which is, I have an entity called car, which is a subtype of vehicle, which will have VIN number, engine displacement, and number of passengers. And then I have a sports car, which will have VIN number, engine displacement, and number of passengers, and then it's going to have acceleration and top speed. Pickup is going to share all the attributes of car, but will have bed size. Then car is a subtype of vehicle, but also a supertype of sports car and pickup. So the answer is yes, you can have a subtype that is also a supertype. Now, in order for us to approach transforming or representing subtype and supertype relationships, we have two approaches: generalization and specialization. So the generalization is the bottom-up approach, which is the process of defining more general entity type from a set of more specialized entity type. Specialization is the opposite, which is defining one or more subtypes of the supertype and forming the relationship. So let's look at the generalization example first. And if I look at these three, so supposing that I have these three entity types, we have some attributes in common, which are these attributes highlighted by the box right here. So I can say, okay, right now I have those shared attributes, and then I can come up with a general entity because these somehow can fall under one category. And I can represent this by having a vehicle supertype, and then these will be subtypes of vehicle. Now we will have something like this, and the question is, why did not we include motorcycle? Because motorcycle does not have any unique attributes other than the ones that are already in the supertype. Now, will I include it if I have some relationships that are unique to the motorcycle? The answer is yes. If I have some relationships that are unique to the motorcycle, then I will have motorcycle right here, and I will have it as a subtype, and I will have some relationship with another entity, and this is what's going to force me to add it right here. But if I don't have this relationship, then I won't have this whole thing, because motorcycle will be included under vehicle. It doesn't have anything more specific to allow us to have an entity type for it. Now the other approach is specialization, which is a direct reverse of the previous one. Suppose that we have an entity that's called part, or entity type that's called part. Now some of the attributes apply to only specific instances. If we look like this, some parts are supplied by a supplier, but some parts are manufactured here. So if I say these apply only to manufactured parts, and these attributes, or this attribute, will apply only to purchased part, which are going to be supplied by a supplier. So I can say my general entity is the one that is going to have all the shared attributes, which is the one surrounded by the blue line right here, and these are going to be in an entity that I'm going to call part. But then I will have manufactured parts containing this attribute, and I will have purchased part containing this attribute. And this is how my ERD is going to look like. Now, you'll have some cases that will require specialization to move to a subtype supertype relationship, and you have some cases where you will have generalization, where you will use it to go to subtype supertype relationship, and that totally depends on the problem you have in hand. Again, for generalization, we had multiple entities or entity types that can fall under a general one, so we generalize it. And in the other case, for specialization, we had an entity type that has some instances that can fall under one category, some other instances that can fall under the other category, and that is why we moved into a subtype supertype using specialization.